All right. Well, welcome to the Graveyard Shift. The purpose of this podcast is to provide you with ideas and inspiration on improving your funeral home's operations and connecting your business with more families. And this podcast, once again, is brought to you by Passari. My name is Todd Carlson. I'm glad to be here for our latest episode. I'm the Chief Sales Officer for Directors Investment Group and our family of companies, including Passari Funeral Directors Life and Claim Check. So once again, I'm shocked. Our guest, our panel showed up again for another episode. We're glad to have you. So Matt, welcome. Matt Bailey, with Bailey Family Funeral Homes in New Haven, Connecticut, in the area up there. Gary Freitag, Spring Grove in Cincinnati, Ohio. And again, Jimmy Lucas here in Fort Worth, Texas. So welcome back, everyone. Looking forward to our latest discussion here. And we're going to be talking about something I think is growing of interest in funeral service, and that's technology, and maybe even get into a discussion about how artificial intelligence, which this group is not a stranger to in many ways, using different levels of intelligence, but talking a little bit about AI. But along the way, we would love to hear our listeners' feedback, and we'd love to get your ideas and your thoughts and your criticisms, and even if you have a compliment, send it our way. You can send those to thegraveyardshift@passari.com. And again, that's thegraveyardshift@passari.com. And again, today, Gary's our complaint guy for today. If you have any complaints, please send them directly to Gary Freitag, and he will promptly ignore them like he does
every other one.
Bring it on, right, Gary? Bring it on. So
you must run a cemetery.
I just hide.
Call him on Sunday at the office.
Oh, exactly. So, hey, you guys know this. You're out there working in and on your businesses, and it's just hard to be a funeral director right now. It's hard to, families are more challenging than ever been. The whole landscape is more challenging to navigate than it's ever been, and and it's not going to get any simpler, right? So I think we all know that. We seem to understand that. But we wanted to talk a little bit about how funeral home owners can leverage technology to help not only keep their businesses efficient, but also to even enhance the effectiveness of their services and their effectiveness on the families that they serve. So, just a little bit of conversation. We finished up our last episode with Tom Antrim, and we're talking, got on this idea of artificial intelligence and AI, and kind of its role or its place in the profession that we all love and cherish. And but I want to take a step back and just talk about maybe when it comes to just technology in general. All right. We think about the march of it's like I heard it's put real well this week it's like we're parked at a railroad crossing, and then the front end of that train coming by is your hospitals with consumer trends, and then schools, and then colleges, and then the workplace, and funeral services like the last car in that train, right? It's coming. We can see it coming. We have time to adjust. We have time to do all of those things. But I just wanted to say, hey, we see that train coming, and I'd just like to throw a question out to the group. Why is it so hard for really anyone? I'm not going to single out funeral directors at all, but really, why is it so hard for business owners and funeral directors to adapt?
That's the way we've always done it, son.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Jimmy,
I'm sorry, Todd. I was going to try to answer the question quickly. Part of it has to do with in our profession. What?
That'd be a change of pace.
Put on our Harvard hats every time Gary speaks. I love it. Yeah.
I'm going to put on my hat.
I think you already have it on.
Yeah. No, what I don't even know what the heck I was going to say now. This is going to be great. The part of the reason why there's resistance to change is the downside of failure in our profession is really significant. You have people that are emotionally hurt, going through all the stages of grief, and you get one shot at this. And if you mess it up, if something goes wrong, even if it's not your fault, it can be psychologically and emotionally damaging to that family. So that's why I think funeral directors in particular are resistant to change because it adds more variables and more things that can go wrong. And the last thing they want is to have some family screaming at them because the service went off the rails. I mean, the story I tell when I'm teaching is we had a funeral director that had a graveside service for an 11-year-old girl, and her 9-year-old sister was graveside, and they decided to do a butterfly release. And they got out to the graveside. It was time to do the butterfly release, and the nine-year-old takes the box, opens it up. Nothing comes out, so she turns it upside down, and all the butterflies fall dead on, right next to the grave. Horrific, right? Just a horrible experience. How often do you think that funeral director did butterfly releases? The answer is he hasn't done one yet since then. He actually he doesn't work for us anymore. He moved on to another opportunity, but he had a sign on his desk that was a butterfly with the circle and the red slash through it. So,
wow.
I mean, this, sometimes we criticize people because they don't want to do change and, they're just stuck in the mud or whatever. But there's a real reason to be resistant to change in our profession. So I think that's, we're talking about caregivers. The last thing they want is to get yelled at, right? They work for hugs. And so I think that is the single biggest deterrent to adding complexity and adding change to the funeral service world, is because when it goes wrong, it goes horribly wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't live stream anymore because it didn't work once, so we just don't do it at all.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that mentality, right, of like...
Yeah. And that's an important thing, because I think one of the things we have to, there's maybe two angles that we can talk here, but, and I'll just throw this question out to Matt. Matt, how do you balance progress and perfection?
You don't, I don't think. That's the problem. And I'm a perfect example of someone that abandons the good in the pursuit of the perfect. I'll have a to-do list that's 6 years old because my target and the way I envision it, or the way, colleagues that I have seen implement things with more resources and more abilities are able to do it versus how I can, it stays on that back burner. And you just have to start. I mean, I think that's the thing for us. You have to begin, and it's progress. And if you're doing part of it, then you're doing part of it. If you're as opposed to doing all of it. I think the big trouble for a lot of us in funeral service, as we look at AI, it's going to be like a lot of other unique professions and what we've seen in history, where our identity of what it means to be a funeral director, I think people feel is threatened by something else. And we've seen that over the course of time. We've seen that where people have said, we heard it initially when funeral celebrants came out. People said, well, if we invite these other people to come in and talk to our families, they didn't view it as another partner, like a clergy person or a florist or someone else that we work with. Funeral directors were looking at it as a rival, because in their mind, they thought, this is going to step on my role in meeting with families. And it's not. And when we get in that defensive posture, that's where we see such like restrictive licensing laws with who could talk to a family and who could do something. And I feel like we become more narrow and more insular in how we do it, and we just try to protect those things that we can, and it changes our identity and makes it even more rigid. So if we keep down that path, then we just become the people that could just touch the body and have to get rid of it and move the person. And that's, I don't think, what we want to be doing. So, while AI is certainly full of both peril and promise, my light went out again. It is, it's something
Yes,
that
it did.
going away, and we have to be prepared to tackle it in a way that I think makes sense, and hopefully be in the front end of it, and hopefully guide how it is that we do embrace it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Matt. And I want to just kind of throw this idea out there. So maybe some funeral directors are thinking that the risk is in the change, right? But Jimmy, what's the risk in not changing?
I always say the only thing for sure is change. It's how we manage change that determines our success. Todd Van Beck did that in ICCFE University when he did the management course. he hammered that in, and it's been something I've held on to for 20 years. And so if you don't change, you get stuck with the same results you've already had, right? So um, always being moving forward, putting even if you're falling down doing it, put your foot where your hand is and stand up there and fall again. So and bigger operations, you have a bigger bag that you're dragging behind you until you can get everybody on the same page. And how you communicate that with your staff, and you have a buy-in, and you create that culture from within, in order to get that buy-in. So it's not a dictatorship. It's look what we are going to do together, and
Mm-hmm.
be open. I think for me, it's being open to other people's perception of that and how we get to the point B. Right, we're here, but it doesn't have to just be my idea. So surround yourself with folks that build on your deficiencies. And for me, that's a lot of deficiencies. So it takes a lot of people, but
Yeah.
being open to those other ideas, and it's worked for us. But
Yeah.
as far as AI, we're all using it right now. I was thinking of Matt and being a celebrant. I mean, if you've heard Matt speak, he's awesome. And I'm sure you use AI a little bit as a base to get started, but he put so much personal stuff into that. And we talked about that last episode a little bit about you don't want to just print off an obituary from AI and hand it to a family. It's a good starting point, but then you have to put the human touch into that to personalize it in a way. I mean, we talked about photographs and these little things. We just did this husband's last week. We had a husband come in, his wife had passed away, and she had a work picture, and it had her little lanyard with her ID, and he wanted that off there. Well, AI took that off for us, right? And it was perfect. And so there's so many different facets that we need to grab onto and not be afraid of, to try as we move forward. We're at the back of the train, as you said, Todd, but we've narrowed that gap in funeral service. Gary talked about it. We've always been 20 years behind, but I think we're narrowing that. And I think a lot of it is it's our willingness to change. It's folks are born into technology now, like they never have been 40 years ago. So I'm excited about AI. We use it. I don't speak a lot like Matt, but when I do speak, it's been super helpful to here's what I want to talk about, and then get a base, and then instead of spending 2 hours writing something, you're spending 30 minutes trying to put your words into what is a decent start. So
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, Gary, you mentioned in a previous episode a little bit about as you lead your teams, you have to. I think you used, maybe to paraphrase, and you can correct me as I'm wrong here, but you've granted your teams actually a little bit of permission to fail trying. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely critical because as you try this stuff, as I said in just the prior episode, the downside is so big. I've run other kinds of companies before, and if you run a batch of widgets that aren't any good, you throw them in the garbage, or you send the person new ones, and everything's fine. Well,
Mm-hmm.
in our business, you can't fix it that way. You can't just say, "Well, here's $100, we'll replace it," or whatever. And so, the most important thing I think is for those frontline funeral directors. Number one, explaining why. The younger employees are not just if it moves, salute it. If it doesn't move, paint it. They want to know why they're doing the things they're doing, and so you have to spend a little bit more time communicating. But then you also have to communicate and demonstrate that when things go badly, you problem solve. You don't blame. The
Mm-hmm.
only time I'm going to blame somebody when a frontline thing goes awry is if they did something that was in their own interest. If they were trying to make it better for the family, easier on the care center, whatever, and it didn't work. Okay, it didn't work. We'll do what we can to repair the situation, and then we'll move on. Um, and I think I said in the last episode, my biggest advice to owners or managers is don't have that interaction with the employee until your emotions are back at level,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's hard to have a constructive conversation with an employee when you've just spent 45 minutes getting screamed at by a family because the butterflies weren't alive, or whatever the situation is. If you can wait the additional time, look, Mary, or Tom, we're gonna talk tomorrow about this. It's gonna be okay. I've talked to the family. We'll work through this. That gives the funeral director the foundation to go ahead and try something else again, knowing that it's not, because for the fear for the employee is not just that I get negative feedback from the family. Then my boss comes in and screams at me, right? It's sort of double jeopardy, for lack of a better term. So I think that's the most important thing is having, going into every year saying, look, I know I'm going to end up paying for 5 to 10 funerals this year because something's going wrong. If I don't, that means we're not pushing the envelope fast enough, right? It means we're not trying to move things along as quickly. So, I mean, we don't necessarily celebrate disasters, but we problem solve them. We don't finger point. To me, that's the most important.
But that's also a leadership style, right,
Yeah.
Gary? I mean, and if you we've all had those bosses, no matter where you are, that they're always trying to find you doing something wrong.
Yeah.
If we spend more time finding people doing things right, it makes those conversations a lot easier on the back end, and it really opens itself up to a learning moment. Sorry, Matt, didn't mean to cut you.
Great point.
But you did.
I know, and I'm going to do it again in just a minute.
How about if I interrupt this time, Pat?
No, I don't recall what the source was. I think it might have been a Harvard Business Review article, and I'm not just saying that. So Jimmy and I both put our hats on. I read an article once, and it was they're doing case studies on customer satisfaction things, and it was a major home builder. I mean, this is it's a huge multi-state operator, and they were doing surveys of customer experiences, and they found that some of their highest customer satisfaction ratings came from clients where there had been a significant mistake or problem or error in the process. And the company had such a culture about quick response, tackling it, addressing it head on, owning it, and finding a solution, and letting the client know they're looking for a solution. And even if it wasn't perfect, getting there. And they found that those customers were even more happy than the customer where everything went perfect, to the point where they were joking that they were considering setting up, like Gary joke, setting up a problem along the way so they could fix it and look good for families. But that became like a major benchmark of measurement from the customer experience about why they liked the firm so much, about, that we did not get the permit on time for the electrician to come in and we were delayed, but so-and-so did this. So I think if we remember that and realize that, as funeral directors especially, we try to have everything so much in our control as we go along that we're afraid to sometimes take those risks and try those new things and do things, because if it does go wrong. But if we understand that if something does happen, if we could frame it of, we were motivated by trying to serve you as best as we can and try to do something special for you, and even though it didn't work out, we're going to do everything we can to meet your expectations and make it better, there's actually a chance that we get even a more satisfied client.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And AI is going to fix all of this in the future.
Yes.
I'm just bringing us back, Todd. I'm bringing us back.
Yeah, well, Jimmy, I just had to hand the keys to you, man. You're a good driver.
That would be fun, but it wouldn't be advisable.
I got to get my helmet.
And a mouthpiece.
The Harvard helmet. Yeah, Harvard, they have a football team, don't they?
They do.
So, hey, I think one of the things that maybe our listeners are struggling with is, and it could be potentially struggling with, is, how do we think AI could potentially impact funeral service? Now, you think about it in various aspects of the funeral planning and arrangement process, and all of that. Kind of just when you think about where AI might pop up in funeral service, kind of what areas do you think about where you see potential for AI to, I'm going to use the word intervene, because I don't know if we know if it's good or bad yet, but it'll be there. But where do you see AI, the opportunity for AI intervening or getting involved in funeral service?
I think, especially in the graphic side and the collateral material side of things, I think as that continues to expand and grow out, we have great resources at our disposal now to help put together, really high quality tribute videos and things like that. But to go through and do some of that photo editing and make it look better, or even to put it in, instead of selecting the way we select themes. I mean, if we could upload the obituary along with the photos and have that tribute video be put together as a documentary style montage where it's able to, put in it old photos of that person's hometown and find different elements and resources to incorporate into it, or, memorial folders or products that we give out that just look better and that are done in a real, professional way, but they take a quarter of the time. I think we're going to see someone's going to harness that in a way that I think is going to disrupt a lot of that element of our profession.
Brian Leffler, friend of all of ours, he's a funeral director up in PA. He turned me on to technology called Topaz. He was in one of his presentations, guys, at DCMC, and it's a AI editor of photographs. And so I bought it, and I don't know why I had to have someone else in my team use it because I'm not smart enough. But anyways, we went through some photographs, and it was amazing what AI did just to button up some old photographs. Did one for my mom when she passed away, and there was an old picture of her and I, and it was incredible. I mean, and if we cannot be afraid of it and embrace it, like these guys have said, that's the direction. And we're in the infancy of this. Can you just imagine what this is going to look like in even 3 years of, I mean, it's not going to be able to take over. It's not like Max Headroom where it's going to take over that interaction.
I just wonder, like, if stuff ties together eventually where you get the death certificate information and your vitals and all that combines together and it goes in and it helps your embalmer have a pre-embalming report where it says, the person died of this condition, they're that age, you type in height, weight, things like that, and maybe it tells the embalmer before the things even to think about. You might need more humectant, you might need more, like, it's, the world is
really cars.
Yeah.
You spend a lot of time in that room, huh, Jimmy?
Yeah.
They don't allow me in that room.
Me neither.
But Gary, do you have any thoughts on some of the aspects of funeral service that AI could touch?
Yeah, there are dozens and dozens of very specific applications like photographs and things like that, which I think are fascinating. One of the things that we talked about even pre-Passari was the ability to do suggestions for funeral directors, so that you're burying somebody that was in the 101st Airborne. The AI thing could say, "Are you aware there's a specific ceremony that the 101st Airborne does? These are the logos. These are the things. And by the way, if you can tell me when the person served and where." I've got a catalog of 10 million photos. I may be able to find a picture you don't have of your father. So,
wow.
Those kinds of things I think would be great. The other thing I think will bolster what I was talking about in an earlier episode about exception reporting. So in other words, if you give AI or some kind of bot, for lack of a term, these are the criteria I want you looking for. I want you to look for exceptions. We've had somebody in our care for 48 hours. We don't have permission to embalm. We've got, whatever it is, there's a service tomorrow and I don't see a casket that's been ordered. Those kinds of things to help management identify, again, you're not trying to watch everything. You're just trying to watch the stuff that looks like, well, wait a minute, that's out of order. That doesn't, that looks fishy, or that looks like it needs some intervention. So I think there's some real value to that, even in our profession, about just giving them parameters. Or, hey, we picked up somebody, it's been 6 hours, I don't see that they've been checked into a cooler.
And hopefully it helps implement people with their own, like, we all have our different strengths and weaknesses. So if you're a one-man or one-woman show running your own funeral home that has to do everything, you may be excellent at one element and you may be totally an unorganized human being. And maybe AI, it knows you have 3 calls. It knows one's a burial, 2 are cremation. It knows 1 has to be prep. And maybe it helps you with your scheduling. And maybe it reminds you didn't order a casket yet. Or maybe it monitors your checklists and helps ping you. And that may be one person's need. Another may be excellent and super well organized on things like that. But maybe they're not really good about, they're not as touchy-feely as they should be, or they're not really good about initiating communication. And maybe it will ping them and say, you should maybe call this family today, make a phone call or make a touch point about them bringing the phone in or checking in with them about their photos. Or I think
like
there's
your example before about the embalming room. You might want to use more X or more Y because this person died of this thing at this age, whatever. If they can make suggestions to help you with the chemistry part back in the back, I think that's another example where it could help.
Yeah, but we can almost lump those under the category of like guardian angel features, right? As like
For sure.
someone looking over your shoulder, looking to make sure that the bases are covered, right? One thing maybe to talk about, because Gary brought up the idea of suggestions, right, for funeral directors. So one of the ideas might be, maybe how in Matt, in the context of the funeral celebrant program, how we could use AI to augment funeral director creativity, right? Because you mentioned, not it might not be someone's strength, so or they might be just not a very good writer. But if you give them something, they can speak well, but they might not be able to create the content. So talk a little bit about various aspects of the funeral ceremony or the funeral event, the memorial event, where maybe AI could help boost effectiveness.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that we all have different levels of creativity, and there are some people who will sit down with a family and they will come up with 3 or 4 ideas that are like truly unique and amazing about that person.
Mm-hmm.
And there are others who are not. They could record information. They're empathetic. They have nice conversations with the family, but they're just not thinking about those creative tasks. And I think those creative elements become particularly important with your direct disposition families, or those families that walk in and know what they don't want, but they don't know what they do want. And if we have elements where when we take the vitals and it tells us that she was a Navy nurse and she was a public school teacher and these were her hobbies and this was the year she was born, and if it comes out with a situation where the family said no, she wasn't religious, we're not going to do what we did for dad who was very religious, so we were just going to do a cremation. I mean, maybe the AI thing gives us some ideas where we say, you know what, she was a public school teacher and she had all these kids who she taught over the years who are going to want to say goodbye. What if we just have a couple hours where folks are going to come together and gather, and since she was a nurse in the Navy, maybe we do, the Nightingale Society comes in and does the nurse honor guard to help do that part, and then maybe we have the military honors because she did answer the nation's call to service. And maybe it just helps people think about things or even ultimately present them better. I mean, maybe AI comes up with some visual cues and print offs that it just does where it shows people what it might look like, so they could visualize this. I think sometimes we're afraid to give suggestions because of someone, God forbid, might say no, which is not the end of the world. But if we tell them we have a system here that gives us some different ideas of how we could honor and pay tribute, and if it's okay with you, I'll just show you what some of those might look like. If 10% say yes, if 20% say yes, that could have a real impact on the bottom line of the operation.
Yeah,
I think
and the
Gary
impact to
just
that
typed
family.
that in there
Yeah.
in his computer, and I think it said her name was Lola. She was a showgirl.
Having it come out as music would be great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all I heard when you started talking, Matt. It went in my head. I'm like, that's what Gary's looking at right now. He's not even paying
Yeah.
attention.
Well, Matt, that's really interesting because you talked about the memorial video, and I've played around a little bit with AI, and I think, I think one thing that can help that we can help funeral directors with is organizing. One of the biggest challenges is how to write the prompt, right? If you've played with AI at all, is what to put in to get out what you're looking for. One thing I've kicked around, and love to hear your guys' thoughts on this, is you have a great memorial tribute video. Why not have AI create a custom song in the style of that person's favorite style of music? So you can I've played this. Works now. I haven't found a way to do it in a larger scale yet. But what if we could take that story and then weave the details of that person's life in a story. And if they were into 70s rock and they wanted to sound like a Steve Miller Band tune, you could do that. I mean,
You're speaking my language now.
yeah. So
Love Steve Miller.
yeah, he's a good egg. So no, not that I say it personally. I just love his music too. But that's another aspect of funeral service. Let's do this. How might AI help a funeral director actually prepare their arrangement conference meeting with the family? Have you given that any thought? Jimmy's like, no, I can tell by his face.
Well, I think that becomes that real personal part, right?
Yeah.
That you're hoping the folks that you have sitting in front of that family are that compassionate. They put the pencil down and they're not there to ask what was your mother's maiden name, right? So those soft skills that Gary's talked about that come into play. I don't know if there's a way to use AI if you know who's all coming in, and if you've learned a little bit about the decedent before they arrive, and you get some talking points about that. Like Todd, you're a crafty guy. You're always building something. If you knew a little something about Todd Carlson and his family came in, and like, how do we engage in that resonates with everybody, which then brings in a comfort level. You're building a rapport and trust. There's probably a way to tie it in there. My brain's not that big to think about that.
Gary's idea of exception reporting in AI. What if AI, I'm just throwing this out there, would actually look at the person's biographical information, their likes, their passions, their hobbies, their occupation, their family and friends, where they spend their time, and AI actually create a list of questions to ask the family about their loved one?
That'd be cool. And I think I could even see it going further where it's maybe a guided conversation presentation that's made for it, where if you have a screen behind you that kind of leads you as you go through, you have some of that information, and because Dad was a veteran, we're going to have to talk about military honors and service and things like that, versus he was not a veteran, so we just get to skip that entire part. I mean, I could see we have his name, and on the screen it personalizes the presentation. It talks about his military service. Maybe it has the branch of service that's on there. Maybe it has a link we could click on to show them what military honors looks like if they've never, most people have seen it, but maybe it's not military honors. Maybe it's the nurse honor guard. So we have the link we could click it and it will show them what it looks like. And then maybe it's even live and interactive as you go along. So if they say, yes or no to a tribute video, it changes what the next part you're going to talk about is going to be, because okay, well, here's how we're going to get the pictures from you, and it could show them a screen of what an email may look like with an upload link. So it'd be kind of neat if it could be dynamic as you're going along, because things move so fast. If you go into thinking you're making one set of arrangements and they're going a different direction, you may forget to ask them certain things. And if it thinks for you, or just is not thinking for you, but helping double check on what you're doing, that could be a really helpful tool.
Milton could use that. That's an inside joke. Sorry, and I hope he watches this episode.
You're the best on public podcasts.
Jim, you'll have to forward this episode to Milton. So
right.
No, so where do you think some dangers are when it comes to AI? So Gary, if you're thinking about AI and you as a leader at Spring Grove and ultimately responsible for the organization, what keeps you up at night right now when you hear AI in funeral service?
Well, I mean, there are implications all over the place. One of the things is how much information are you going to put in a public AI format as opposed to a private one? Company information, things like that. I think one of the other threats to the profession is our own regulatory constructs that we've put together, right? It's all state by state. You can look at it. It's been motivated by a bunch of stuff. But one of the things that is a danger when you have a profession or an industry or whatever that's evolving, guess what evolves the slowest? The regulatory environment around it, right? I happen to know this from school, but the only industry that ever, yes, it was at the other school. The only industry that has ever asked itself to be deregulated is the airline profession. And the reason what
could go wrong?
What? and they were wrong? I'm sorry, Jim.
So what could go wrong?
Yeah. Well, the real reason was it was during the OPEC crisis where the price of oil went up by a factor of 8, and the regulatory people couldn't change the pricing fast enough because fuel's the number 2 expense for an airline, right? And they finally said we can't make any money under this situation just because they couldn't move fast enough, and they eventually Carter got rid of the regulation of the airlines. So I think that's one of the things I'm worried about in the profession is our profession moves very slowly. Our regulatory environment moves even more slowly. So if we get in a situation where we've got to evolve to be able to compete with the Marriotts and the country clubs of the world, we got to make sure that the regulatory environment isn't a millstone dragging us back down.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there's an opportunity for it to help us with compliance in certain ways too, though, because I mean, I'm thinking one thing that comes to mind is pricing. And I think one of the hesitations that funeral directors have is like, well, the GPL makes no sense to anybody but other funeral directors, and that.
And the FTC.
Yeah, so people go through and they always get it wrong and they double bill or they forget things and they call on the phone and blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, what if you upload your GPL in such a way where people are able to just interact entirely with it and come up with their own price quote based upon those weird, unique circumstances that funeral directors always complain about, where, you know, we have this one cemetery that has overtime charges on Saturday starting at noon versus starting at 9, and our vault company is different on a Saturday versus a Sunday. And I mean, if it had all that information in there and and it could truly interact with someone online to get a full accurate price quote, would that put us in a better position to be in compliance in certain matters?
And I think what Gary and Matt just said, Todd, with what the fearful part about AI is AI unchecked, right? So that would be my fear of just completely relying on it without putting a second set of eyes on it and just saying, here it is, and trusting it implicitly. Did I use that word right, Gary?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I don't know. What were you trying to say?
Just making this shit up as we go.
All right. Oh man, where's the dump button when you need it? All right. Hey, no, that's you know, it's really good because I think that's fair because you've got, you know, and then let me ask you this way: how does your average kind of, you know, funeral director, you might be, you know, running 100, you know, to 200 funerals at your funeral. How do you find your way in this changing world with technology? What's the best advice, Matt, you could give a funeral director who is looking to find a way to navigate these new worlds?
Talk to colleagues that do it well. If you get along with colleagues, which is always helpful. I think, you know, on our last episode we had, you know, Tom Antrim on, and there's stuff that French does very, very well, and they've been leaders on, as we talked about last time. I mean, I think Jimmy talked about, you know, calling him up and asking questions and doing things. I mean, if you have someone that's ahead of you in the process and they have the inevitable mistakes that come up and they can help you learn from that, I think that's a big part.
Do you think you'd be upset if we gave his cell phone number out on this episode?
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, just put it on the screen.
Just kidding, Tom.
No, and also I would just say that another big thing is, you know, you have to get yourself in a mindset where you stop being afraid that it's going to go wrong and that you're willing to learn from the hiccups along the way. It's always hard the first time, and it's just a matter of getting better and growing up. All
right. Well, cool. Well, all right, Jimmy.
I want to let you know that I filtered right there, and you're welcome.
That's why I had to stop talking.
I know.
I can see the twinkle in your eye, and I lost my train of thought.
Awesome. Well, hey, Jimmy, when it comes to you know, just ongoing, you know, growing in the funeral home, in the use of technology, what's some advice you could give our listeners today?
These guys both said it. Embrace it, because doing nothing is paralysis. And paralysis and doing nothing is not going to just put you on the back of the train. The train's going to leave the station. You're not going to be on it. And the only thing for sure, and I said it earlier, is change. We got to manage that change in order to determine our success. And I believe that. And it's okay. Just try a little bit at a time. I don't know if is there a funeral home or funeral director in the country that's not trying to use AI a little bit with obituary writing? I mean, surely even that's happening a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if not, try it. And organizing your thoughts, if you happen to be creating this service and you're a celebrant, or you have to get up and speak and that's not your thing, AI can help you write a little, you know, hey, I need 5 minutes on this, and it's a great foundation for you to get started on. And so embrace that.
All right,
That's
so awesome. Great advice. Gary, I hate to leave you with a final word, but we're going to take our chances today.
So do we.
Stop talking, so how could you not? I would tell you that even if you're in a leadership position, do some of it hands-on yourself. I forced the organization to go to digital arrangement conferences back in like 2006 or 7. We used the Batesville Planner. And the person that was running our funeral homes gave me a very nice, well executed bullet point list of all the reasons why we shouldn't do it. Our funeral directors are not, this, you can't manage the data, doesn't, and it was very well articulated. And I said, I hear you, but we're doing it anyway. And he hesitated for a second. He said, fine, then I'm going to do the first 5 because I need to know how it works. Even if I'm not going to be doing it every day, I need to show the staff I can do it. And once he did 4 or 5 of them, he said, I get it. This is better. And we'll roll it out. So there's a little bit of leadership from the front or hands-on in the beginning. I think, especially if you're, leading a firm like Jimmy's or Matt's, where the employees are looking to you as to how serious is this? How important is it? And you can also help debug it. When they come to you and say, hey, it doesn't work when you do X, Y, or Z, if you've used it already, say, yeah, it is. You just got to go to the other tab. Or, yeah, I've already told the software developer we need to fix that. So I would lead from the front when you can.
Awesome. Great advice. Well, hey, we are, that was a good note to end on, Gary. And, again, we come to the end of our time together here. And, I think this topic is going to resurface, right? This idea of technology and funeral service and how we use funeral service. Yeah, Matt said that he's Debbie Downer on this one. He's
It'll go the way to the internet. It's never going to work.
Yes.
Done. It was a nation.
Yeah, so it'll go away. No, but the idea that I think we'll be revisiting this. I think this is something that our listeners are struggling with and genuinely interested in learning more about. So I think we'll revisit it. But we'd love to hear how our viewers think and listeners think about what they think about AI. And you can email your thoughts over to thegraveyardshift@passari.com. Thegraveyardshift@passari.com. We love your thoughts again, your opinions, and your ideas. And anything that you would love to
how
share.
You're using AI. I want to know how others are using AI in funeral service.
Give us some specific examples if you can.
Yeah. I want to know.
Yeah, and that's great. So how you're using AI, just shoot it over to thegraveyardshift@passari.com. And who knows, if you have an interesting use of AI, you too may find yourself as a guest on this program. Helping spread the use of AI and the knowledge that you've gained to others to help serve families better.
Don't tell them that, Todd. Nobody's going to submit anything. No, thanks.
All of our guests get their graveyard shift embroidered yoga pants for Gary wears.
And designed by Gary.
And a complimentary Harvard University hat.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right. Hey, another thing. Please, if you're a listener, don't keep us a secret. We'd love to others to learn from these experiences of these wonderful men here in funeral service. And we'll looking forward to our next episode of the Graveyard Shift coming soon. And just do one thing: take something you learned today and put it to use. With that, all have a great and blessed day.